Let's dive straight into this explainer because let me tell you, inheriting the mum and dad's house can be an absolute minefield. And when it comes to sorting it out, time literally is money. 100,000 euros. Think about that for a second. That massive chunk of your parents' hard-earned cash could easily vanish into thin air, eaten up by legal fees, if you and your siblings can't agree and a judge has to step in to force a decision. Just gone. Simply because the family couldn't sit down and sort it out over a cup of tea. Section 1. The Great Sibling Divide. We are looking at a classic crossroads for working Irish families inheriting property.
It's the inevitable clash, isn't it? On one side, you've got the sibling who wants to put the house straight on the open market, sell up, and take their half of the money. Fair enough. But then on the other side, you had the sibling who wants to hold onto the property for themselves. It's a tale as old as time, and it's usually exactly where the petty rows over who gets the good china or who left the immersion on suddenly turn into something far, far more serious.
Athboy solicitor Elaine Byrne has a fairly stark warning for families in this exact spot. You need to have a bit of sense and agree on a plan together first. As she puts it, siblings will save themselves unbelievable stress and expense if they just do their absolute best to agree before ever crossing a solicitor's threshold. Because you know yourself, once the professionals are brought into a dispute, the meter is running, lads.
Section 2. The tax traps explained. Because walking into the revenue commissioners blindly without a solid plan can be an absolute disaster for your finances.
So first up, we have to understand the actual limits. Children can inherit up to 400,000 euro tax-free from their parents, which is a generous enough threshold. But anything above that mark, you're hit with a hefty 33% capital acquisitions tax. That is a massive slice of the inheritance going straight back to the state.
And that brings us to a really crucial warning. The executor of the will has to submit a registered valuer's assessment to the probate office. Once that valuation goes over to revenue, you are completely stuck with that number. There is absolutely no going back later on and saying, oh, actually, we think it's worth a bit less now. Nope, it is totally locked in. And this perfectly illustrates the danger of dragging your heels and delaying a sale. Say the house is valued at 500,000 euro when your parents pass. You hold off, maybe argue for a bit, and finally sell it later down the line for 700,000 euro. Now, you might think, brilliant, we just made an extra 200 grand. But you haven't. You've actually accidentally walked yourself straight into a massive tax trap. And it's all because of this punishing number right here, 33%. Beneficiaries can be held liable for capital gains tax on that 200,000 euro difference between the original valuation and the final sale price. It takes a massive, totally unnecessary bite right out of the inheritance, all because of a bit of poor planning and delay.
Moving on to Section 3, Route 1 versus Route 2. How do we actually bridge the divide and avoid those nasty tax traps? Well, it really comes down to choosing between selling up or buying a sibling out. Selling is, frankly, the simplest course of action. The executor submits the forms, sells the house on the open market, and you just split the cash. Job done. But if one sibling desperately wants to keep the family home, you must look at the overall estate and see if there's enough liquid cash left over in the pot to balance things out fairly. If the estate does actually have the cash, you can use a brilliantly tax-efficient legal tool called a deed of disclaimer. Basically, it means officially refusing an inheritance or a gift, which then causes it to fall right back into the estate and pass along to the next entitled person. So let's look at how this actually plays out in reality. Say the valuer assesses the property at 500,000 euro. The sibling who wants the money simply disclaims their half of the house in exchange for receiving 500,000 euro in cash from the rest of the estate. The other sibling then gets the 500,000 euro house. It's like magic, because it means both of you inherit equally directly from the parent, keeping the whole shebang incredibly tax efficient. But hold your horses. You can't just do this whenever you feel like it. This deed of family arrangement has to be completed strictly within 2 years of the death. If you miss that window, it officially constitutes a disposal of the property, which immediately triggers that awful capital gains tax we talked about. And as always, make absolutely sure you get your own tailored tax and legal advice because every family's situation in Ireland is a little bit different.
Section 4. Keeping solicitors at bay. Let's wrap things up by looking at how to keep the peace.
And most importantly, how to keep your family's hard-earned money out of the courts. Solicitor Elaine Byrne's ultimate advice is dead simple. Start early, speak to your sibling, and agree on everything together first. If you sit down as sensible adults before making anything official, sorting out the family really doesn't have to be a nightmare. Honestly,
Anything is possible when people are just being reasonable with each other.
Which leaves us with a fairly provocative thought to end this explainer on. When the sad day eventually comes to sort out the mom and dad's will, will your family be able to agree? Or will you be handing $100,000 over to a judge? Are you and your siblings really prepared to communicate? Or are you risking your family's entire legacy on a costly, bitter dispute? Have a good think about that. Thanks for joining me.